Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to our annual Vernon User Group meeting. We're excited to be able to present this to over 100 people that have registered from all around Australasia. That's particularly heartening given the difficult working circumstances that many of us have faced over the last year. Today's session is going to be focused on recent developments, including our latest major release of Vernon CMS, and we'll be talking about plans for the coming year. One of the things that we've done this year that's new is that we've made a YouTube video to summarise the new features in the version. So that's available on our YouTube channel. So you can just search for Vernon CMS on YouTube and you'll see we've got a channel with a whole range of videos. And Lisa's been putting together some great videos, including this one about the new version.
Our Dusky Dolphin 12.4 Vernon CMS release has some new features for you to enjoy.
So that's the quickest way to get a recap of what's in the new version. Earlier in the year we had the latest of the minor updates in Vernon CMS. And so that was 12.3.1 and that was released in June. So that's just got small enhancements and a series of bug fixes. One of the enhancements is that the medium field, which is a text field for describing the medium of an object, that's been enhanced to allow you to create a series of pick list or authority terms to standardize the data entry. So you can still edit that field as text, but you can create generic terms that will be used for many different objects. We've also added new fields into the site file, and these are particularly important for historic sites and for archaeological sites. So you can now note associated dates and periods that relate to those physical sites. We've also introduced the option of turning on or off some of the search indexes in Vernon. Now they have a huge impact on the performance of the system. They add extra work for the system to do when you save a record, but many of those search indexes are for specialist collection types, so you're now able to turn those off to improve the performance in the system. And by default, new indexes that we add in later versions will be turned off by default, and there'll be instructions as to how you can turn them on if they are relevant for your particular collection. Each of our major releases is named, so Dusky Dolphin was this year's release, and that's just come out a few weeks ago in September. We've already got many sites that are running that latest version. We've currently got 20 or 30 sites that have already upgraded. One of the things that we've introduced in this version is better release notes. So all of the help for Vernon CMS is web-based, and there's now a new release notes section right at the top of the help. So that gives you a quick summary for all of the recent versions. What are the changes in that version? When you log into Vernon for the first time as a user after an upgrade, it'll pop up with a message to tell you that there are release notes. And so it'll be much easier now for your end users within the organisation. And some of our organisations have more than 100 people using Vernon. It'll be easier for those individual users to know that there are changes in the system and have an easy way to reference those. They're also accessible from the help menu in Vernon now. We've introduced an entirely new file into this Vernon version. It's called consumable, and it's for all of the parts of an object which need to be periodically replaced. So for example, a light bulb that's part of an artwork might need to be replaced periodically, but it may be a very specialist bulb and you need to track where to get it from and how regularly it needs to be replaced. I'll swap across to our live system and you can see how that works in practice. So this is Vernon CMS 12.4 and this is the new consumable file. So it's referenced from individual object records, and one object record might have many different types of replaceable components. For each of those you can create a record describing that type of consumable item. So in this example I've got a specialist projector bulb for a projector that's used in one of the digital artworks within my collection. I can link to the supplier for that artwork light bulb projector item, and I can record other items such as the cost and the lifespan. There's new fields in this version for recording other technical information and for linking to those consumable types. So these are those fields, and they're available through the generic physical aspect screen. So there might be all manner of technical detail, and that can vary considerably depending on the type of item. So in this particular example, I've got a digital projector, and it might be necessary for me to record what's the voltage, what type of plug does it have, what type of light output does it have. And so now there's a new set of fields where you can record that in detail. All of these things tie together in one new window that's part of the object file. Many collections have accessory items where they're not formal parts of the collection, but they're needed to support the collection items that you have. An example would be a physical plinth on which a statue stands. You still need to keep track of where you've stored that plinth, and maybe you've got other details on who made it, the dimensions, the history of where it's been located. You can now record those accessories as full object records and then relate them to other collection items. Those accessories themselves might be complex. They could be things like a digital projector, and then they in turn link to that consumable file that we saw before. So the new accessory window is just one of the subcategories under object. And again, I'll swap to the demo system and show you a quick example of that. So here I've got an example of a Sony digital projector. I'm still describing it with all the range of fields that we have in the object file, but we've got a specialist screen that ties together the fields that are most relevant for accessories into one place. Usually those accessories would have a status that distinguishes them from the rest of the collection. So in my case, I've marked that as an accessory, whereas most of the things they might be marked as accessioned items. We've got that technical information table where we can record things like voltage and screen resolution. This version extends the relationship table, so as well as relating two different objects together, you can also start giving a history and say what dates those particular things were related. So this projector was in use for a particular digital artwork for the range of dates that I've noted there. There's then a whole lot of descriptive information about the makeup of that accessory item, how it was produced, and then links to other things like external files. So you might have a manufacturer's manual as a PDF, which could be linked as an external file for that projector. So that's the accessory file, which will work for a range of different collections. We've also extended the activity file so that all of the key person references and the department field accept multiple entries. So that wasn't the case in the previous version, and you sometimes had cases where a donation or a loan might have been from a couple. So now you can list two different people and multiple different departments for any of those activity records. We've extended the person file. That's becoming more and more important for our clients as their detail on biographical information of contacts that relate to the collection grows. So we've added more fields for recording ethnicity categories and languages to person records. So you could imagine for an Aboriginal artist, for instance, you might describe their particular affiliation to a group within Australia and one or two different languages that they speak. And that can then be shared with other systems. It might be presented on the online catalogue within Vernon Browser. In prior versions, there were only text fields available for those. So now these are keyword or authority controlled fields where you can standardize those language and ethnicity terms. XML import is a powerful tool in Vernon for bulk importing records into the system, either adding data to records that already exists or creating entirely new records. So there's been a whole range of extensions to this tool in this new major version, and one of those includes the ability to detect what fields are present in the XML file and then automatically get all of those headings. So we can see here I've got a set of person data, and using that new Get Element Headings button, I've been able to pre-fill in what fields exist in the file, so you can then map those to where you want that data to go into Vernon when you import that data. There's the option when you're managing groups of records to copy that data to Excel. We've extended that so there's more options for how you copy that data. So whether or not you want images to be included in that, and the ability to copy just from within a table of a single record to Excel with or without headings. So that's just opening up more options for getting the data out of the system into other different products that you're making use of. One of the more technical tools which we provide is the field usage count. So that will summarize either for a group of records or an entire file how many times each field has been used. So it's great for giving you a snapshot of what parts of the database are being used by your catalogers, and that might help you detect anomalies, such as just a few records being missing a particular field, or perhaps fields which are being used inappropriately where only a few records have data in a particular field and it should really be entered somewhere else. In this version, you can now easily copy those reports to Excel. We've also got sites that are using the diary file with its tasks for managing equipment testing and tagging. And so we've extended the diary file to have a new reference field so that at the end of an equipment testing project, you can tag everything with the number that it was assigned by the electrical tester. So we have an ongoing series of minor updates. So that's primarily to tackle any bugs that are found in the software, but it is an opportunity to do minor fixes and enhancements. Our next major named version will be Eager Egret, so that's aimed for the end of next year. The most critical change in that for us is the upgrade of the underlying platform on which Vernon is built. So the database and the front end within Vernon is using a product called OpenInsight. There's a new major version of that, and the version we use, version 9, will be reaching end of life. So it's essential that we upgrade that. That gives us access to features for when we're developing things. So there's improvements to the way that the user interface can be built in OpenInsight 10, and there's improvements to the performance. We're also reviewing a lot of the things in the person file, because as I said, there's many sites where that's becoming more and more critical to the information that they're managing within Vernon CMS. So changes that we're particularly looking at are better supporting the LBGT plus community within Vernon by recording things like sexuality and pronouns, making the worker and employment information more visible by moving that to the main page within Vernon. Currently that's only accessible from the work screen, which is a sub-screen people have to get into. Providing an option where you might have multiple similar records for a person and you don't necessarily want to delete them, you want to mark that one of those should now be used instead of another. It may be that there's an older record for a company which shouldn't be used anymore, but you still need to keep that record as part of its history. Lastly, we want to make it easier to report on maker information from the object file, so providing more permanent field links from the object report to allow you to easily select different kinds of maker information to embed in an object, particularly artwork report. There's also a few different requests that have come in from the natural science users for Vernon CMS. So we're looking at indexing the classification date so that people can easily find anything that was classified in a certain period, and indexing the site datum field, so that's used for geographic coordinates of collection sites. The classification file within Vernon is also key for the natural history users. So that's where you would record things like species names. They often have information to say what the conservation status of that particular species is, but that may vary depending on the geographic region, and it may vary depending on the organisation that's assessed that. So we're adding an extended table so that you can mark those things specific to a particular area. So you might say that the North Island brown kiwi was vulnerable on a particular outlying island, but it's endangered on the main North Island regional area. There's also a few sundry enhancements that we're looking at as part of that upgrade. Our spell checker at the moment only supports Latin characters, so that's particularly an issue for people wanting to spell check Māori words that contain the long macron diacritic characters over the vowels. So we're looking at supporting the full Unicode set of characters as part of a spell checker upgrade. At the moment, you can't search on the current condition keyword. You can only search on the whole condition keyword history. So allowing people to narrow that down is going to be important. And then lastly, the option to check whether mandatory fields have been filled in on a set of data you're importing from another application. So flagging whether any of those elements were missing in data that you're trying to move in bulk into our system. I'll look ahead to the things that we've got planned for the next year and some of the things that have happened for the company over the last year. So the most noticeable change for us has been the ongoing necessity to work from home. So Auckland's currently at the end of 3 months of an extended restricted lockdown, and so that's meant we haven't been able to work in person together. Of course, that does have advantages as well. We're not having to commute to the office, we've got more flexible working hours. And we rely a lot on technology to get around the problems of not being able to work directly together. So we use Microsoft Remote Desktop to access copies of Vernon for support purposes. And we rely heavily on Slack, a communications platform where we can send instant messages to each other and do short audio or video calls. We've continued to gain new clients over the last year, which is encouraging for us, and that's included the Aratoi Museum of Art and History in New Zealand, and another section of the University of Auckland, the Geological Sciences Collections. We're really excited to have the Nelson Mandela Museum in South Africa join our family of sites within South Africa. So we've had Rene Van Song as our staff member working in South Africa, and he's been with us now for over 10 years and has built up a considerable range of clients in that country. Another couple of new sites are the Central Goldfields Art Gallery in Victoria, and then one of the oldest schools within Scotland, including their fabulous 1700s school buildings, which are part of their collection that they're managing. One of the busiest areas for us in the last 12 months has been developing online collection sites. And so that's the work that Shinoy Sam in our office is doing behind the scenes, helping with the branding of those individual collection sites and helping people choose what content they're sharing with the public. So that's been particularly important for our collection sites over the last year, because a lot of our customers aren't open to the public or haven't been for some period of the last year. So I've just got a quick list there of some of the sites that we've launched over the last year. Now, one of the major one of the major changes in the latest version of the browser is the introduction of the topic file. So I'll just jump over to a web browser and show you some examples of that. So Motat are extensively using the topic file to capture more complex stories about the collection. So the topic file lets you record detailed text about a particular topic. You can include formatting using the Markdown formatting standard, and you can link to many of the other sections of the database, so to the objects, to the subjects, to the places. And so this is Motat's live website, and we can see a whole range of different articles that they've written over the last year. If I click into one of those, each of those articles can have one or more images. So we can see photos here of the iron lung that was used for people that suffered from polio during the polio epidemic. And then we can see an article, in this case written by Kristen McAlpin. We can see examples of the formatting, so they've got bold, italic. They've also got bullet points and references to third-party sites, so you can see extensively how that topic was researched and jump to related material. We can also link to other parts of the system. So there's one related object from their collection. So we could go and read about that particular item as opposed to the broader story. I'll show a couple of quick examples of the branding work we do as well. So one of the sites we launched in the last year was the Fletcher Trust Archive. That's the first site that we've had that's dedicated just to archives in the last few years. They've got nearly 100,000 items that are catalogued and available through this website. Fletcher Trust manages the archives of the Fletcher organisation, which is primarily involved in the construction and timber industries within New Zealand, and they have a rich photographic collection representing those industries over the last 100 years. As an archive collection, they're cataloguing things at multiple levels depending what time they've got available. So I can, for instance, see the broad series they've got. So for instance, Winstone is one of the subordinate companies, and I could see all of their press clippings where they've written a broad description of the individual clippings that are available, and then as they've got time, they've added in catalogue records for the individual items. So Vernon supports that archival structure where we can catalogue at different levels and provide clear links for people jumping between those different levels. One of the largest art collections that we've worked with in the last year was Art Gallery of Western Australia. So they've made the decision to share their entire collection online. Of course, some of those things they don't have copyright clearance for, so they just publish the catalogue record to make sure that the public's aware that they hold that item, and then the person could inquire further to get information about whether that work's physically on display or not. We worked with them to come up with a series of filters for the search results page, including an easy filter to see all of the works that are on display. So there's currently around 300 works that are on display in the physical gallery. We also customized the layout, so there's a focus on the image on each of the detail pages. In their case, they didn't always have detailed descriptions of the item, so we also generate a description of the artwork based on the object type and provide that as a way of jumping to the related items in the collection. So when viewing this one painting, I can immediately see that there's over 2,000 other paintings in the collection, and I could jump to those. One of the other major changes in Vernon Browser version 6, which was released this year, is the ability to have managed moderated comments. So many of our sites enable the option for the public to add a comment to a collection item, and that can be a great way to learn more about your collection. There may be somebody in the general public that knows something of significance about that item, and it gives them an easy way to share that information. However, the downside is that there are people like spammers out there on the internet that will be adding malicious or useless information to your collection items. With the new moderated comments facility, you can have all comments automatically going into a moderation queue, and it's only when you approve those do they appear on the public site. We've also added more security into Vernon Browser. We're seeing more interest in people using Vernon Browser as an intranet website, so providing web-based access into the internal collection data for all of your broader staff. And so because of that, we've added in security features so that you can set up different security groups for users. So some of the users of Vernon Browser may have read-only access, whereas some might be administrators. And then also the option to have multi-factor authentication. So if we're hosting an intranet site for you, that provides an extra layer of protection to make sure only the people that are allowed to visit that site are getting in. So multi-factor authentication is where you see a second question after you've logged in with usually a time-based passcode. Vernon Browser supports sending that by email or through one of the authentication apps like Google Authenticator, where it's coming up with those random 6-digit codes constantly as a second level of check when you're logging into the site. So there's a question about whether our comments facility works with Google reCAPTCHA. So Google Recapture is a tool which you'll all run into almost every day. It's that I am not a robot check that comes up on different websites. So Vernon Browser uses that extensively, particularly for the comments, and that's a way to do some automatic blocking of people that are commenting based on whether Google thinks they already are flagged as a spammer for some reason. The comments moderation, however, provides an additional layer of protection because it means that you could have a human adding a comment, but it's still malicious, and you still therefore have an opportunity to block that comment. In Vernon Browser version 7, we're looking at supporting the International Image Interoperability Framework. So that's a bit of a mouthful. IIIF is what it's more commonly known as. And so that's something where we've developed support for it in our other product eHive, and we're now looking at porting those features across to Vernon Browser. We've also got a set of candidate features. Some of them are ones that were raised last year, and so those continue to be at the top of our list of features that we're looking to support in the coming year. So that includes support for publishing records from other files in Vernon, so sites for archaeological collections and for natural sciences collections, and documents, which can be important for things like art collections where you've got extensive biographies that relate to a particular artwork. We also want to allow people the option of downloading their search results in different formats, and that's one of the working groups we've flagged for deciding exactly what would be the most useful format for downloading those search results. The access to high-resolution images can be complicated. You may have cases where you can only do that for things that are out of copyright. So those options we want to make possible to restrict down to just certain rights types. The International Image Interoperability Framework lets you do complex things with images, like zooming and panning very large files. So that's one of the main motivations in providing access to that standard. We also need to continually upgrade the underlying infrastructure of Vernon Browser as the size of our sites grow. Queensland Museum, for example, have nearly 1 million items on their public online collection, and we need to make sure that that kind of volume is handled well within the application. I'll look at a couple of the examples of those new features that have been in use at sites that we've worked on over the last year. So one of the features in Vernon Browser 6 is the kiosk mode. That lets you take a Vernon Browser website and present it on a physical touch screen as an interface for your visitors to access all of the collection information while they're on site. This is a photograph of that touchscreen in use at Museum Theatre Gallery, Hawke's Bay. And the touchscreen kiosk does a few things. It lets you browse the collection from what we call the bird's eye view. It automatically disables links to other sites so that people using that kiosk can't accidentally jump out of the website. And then lastly, it disables features that don't make sense within a shared kiosk. So for instance, the option to share a page on Facebook is disabled because on the shared kiosk you're not going to get each individual person logging into their Facebook site. We've also been working with some of these clients on embedding third-party content. So one of the examples that's come up with a couple of projects is displaying 3D scans of objects. So we've done that with Queensland Museum working with Pedestal, which is a product that's particularly aimed at the natural sciences collections area. I'll again swap back to my web browser and we can see an example of that in action. So this is a bone specimen of one of the items that's within their collection. It's a particularly important item, and so they've done a scan of that object, and by clicking on the 3D link I can open up that 3D scan, and so that's using the third-party platform of Pedestal. That content can be accessed directly through the Pedestal 3D website, but we've extended Vernon Browser so that those 3D scans can be embedded directly within the website. Another example of embedded content is the use of SoundCloud audio files. So British Red Cross recorded 150 curated descriptions of objects as part of their 150 Voices project.
This small, soft cloth doll is dressed up to look like a British Red Cross voluntary aid detachment.
So that's making use of the SoundCloud platform. There's two advantages of that. Firstly, we're able to make use of SoundCloud's impressive set of hardware to make sure that those audio files play in all kinds of different scenarios, different devices, and different speeds of internet connection. And it also provides another platform through which people will discover your content. So if people went directly to SoundCloud, they'll now be able to find some of that British Red Cross content. In terms of 3D objects, we've also integrated with Sketchfab, and so that's something that we've been helping Pukeariki with. So for example, this is one of the specimens within their natural sciences collection, their albatross in this case. And again, we can embed the player for this third-party platform, so people can discover this directly on the Sketchfab website, but if they've found this collection item, they can go straight into Vernon Browser and see that 3D scan within the website. So that's a few of the projects we've been working on to embed content from other products. One of the other areas where we're seeing adoption of our product is the API that provides you direct connection into the raw data in Vernon. So we've had 2 sites launch where they're relying on that to grab the data that they want to embed then in another application. So the Monash University Museum of Art have built their own bespoke front end to the collection, and that's relying on that raw data that they're pulling out of Vernon through the Vernon CMS API. So the ACMI Lens is a project where visitors can carry around a cardboard lens that has an embedded chip in it, and they use that chip then to pull up extra detail and to mark things they're interested in to return to later. All of the object cataloging detail is coming from Vernon, and so that's through the Vernon CMS API. I'd also like to introduce the latest person of our team. In the technical communication team, we've added Penny Collins. So she comes to us with a wealth of experience from the University of Auckland, and she's replacing Cherry, who left earlier in the year. There's also a rename there of what that group is called within our team. So previously that was the documentation team, whereas the new technical communication term, it better captures the range of different types of materials we're now producing. Everything from videos to complex online websites. The latest version of our help is now available through the Vernon CMS-help vernonsystems.com website. We've also continued to build up our video channel within YouTube. So if you search for Vernon CMS within YouTube, you'll be able to see a whole range of different videos. We regularly do online webinars where we talk about a particular topic in Vernon, and we've made the decision to record those now, all of the ones that we've done over the last few months, and share those freely on the website. So if ever there's a webinar about a particular topic that you weren't able to attend, you can now just go back to that on the Vernon CMS YouTube channel. We also introduced last year our online course, and this has been essential for allowing us to still provide training to clients while we aren't able to physically visit them on site. It's been hugely popular. We've had over 150 people go through the course over the last 12 months, and that interest is not abating. We're getting more and more people interested in it, and we're looking at seeing how we can extend that course now to cover more advanced topics within the system. So that covers a recap of some of the main things that we've been working on. We'd encourage people to sign up for our newsletter. There's a link for that at the header of the vernonsystems.com website. And so that's where we're always posting news of features that we're developing, of events that may be of interest, upcoming webinars, for instance, and sites that we're launching for different clients, so you can just see the work that we're doing all the time.